Okay, hey everybody. Gonna be doing this card with Mako from the TigerSharks. It's gonna be one of those fun pieces that's gonna start off a mini set within the series. Hoping to get everything going and knock this out fairly quick. I have been trying to do more of the live type cards for the upcoming stuff, more action poses rather than just having them the profile and headshots. I wanted to do a little more. This is another 80s style cartoon. Bear with me just a second. I'm loading my lid. So I'm going to knock this out real quick. The TigerSharks, if you don't know what they are, they were made in the mid 80s for they were made basically by the same studio, I believe, as far as I can tell from the history of it. They were made by I don't think they were made by Filmation, but I think they were made by the same studios that were working with Filmation to do so, because they have the same look and a lot of the same voice actors. But the series was made just in that vein of the Thundercats, Silverhawks, He-Man, right in those big 80s cartoons where everybody was doing, that live look to their stuff. Gotta flatten out this edge a little bit so it stops streaking. If you ever get a lead doing that, what happened was my lead is flat on one side. It was a brand new lead that I put in, so it was kind of edged, and it was leaving a track, which is to split it like that right there. I just did that with the broadside so you guys can see it. That little divide where it'll bring them off as two pieces, two separate lines. That's the flat edges catching on one side of the lead and the other side of the lead, and then the flat surface in the middle, and it's leaving that edge out there. That's why you have to flatten them out. To overcome that, just turn your lead a little bit and get on a scratch piece of paper and change that tip edge by grinding it down a little bit, and it'll take that off of there for you. But anyway, this is Mako. He's not the leader of the TigerSharks. He's basically their field leader. He is a very interesting character. Getting that ridge line in there. And they only had one season of these characters of this series, but man, I really really dug it, and it had one of those 80s catchy theme song, rock style theme songs, so it was just all about it. That pop rock type of catchy tune that makes you want to move, whether you like the song or not. You just have to, you get with the rhythm and move and whatnot. And it's cheesy, and but whatever, it works. It works really well for that series. Now I'm trying to get into more action, like I said, more action-oriented poses, and this guy gives himself over to that really well because he has a very vicious-looking appearance in his action stuff, and they didn't do a lot of that because of the kids' cartoon ratings and stuff like that had to be a certain way and whatnot, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and if they brought it back now, it would be probably even worse unless someone like Netflix or Hulu picked it up and did something great with it, or they went direct to DVD. Because the violence that it would take to make this series work probably wouldn't work in modern cartoons. And I was talking with a buddy of mine earlier about it when I showed him this layout and stuff, and I said, that's one of the things we perfectly agree on is kids these days just don't have cartoons anymore. They don't get to be kids anymore. The kids cartoons they have are all for little preemie kids, little first, second grader type of kids, and they just don't have a lot of cartoons anymore just for entertainment value. rather than, learn this, learn that, and, backpack this, and, Diego that. And it's just, I'm for that stuff. I believe in educational stuff. I have my daughter watch it when she was a kid, when she was little. But man, it's just one of those things. It's just they don't have the entertainment cartoons that we used to have. So that's part of what I want to do with my comics, is bring them the entertainment value back, because they just don't have that anymore. And I mean, comics are losing a lot of it too, because of the fact that everybody's going different ways with all these, multi this and multi that and all that mess. And it's just a mess right now. But we'll get back there eventually. But if you want to make good comics, make entertaining comics. Watch those old cartoons and see how they were done. And then make comic books like that. Make it good versus evil, and make it, read the classic comics that had the stories in them, the decent stories in them. And it didn't have to work on a fad or, some kind of huge epic scale storyline every time. It was just, every one was interesting. Think about that. It was an interesting story, whether it had a big epic story in it or if it was just a little lesson learned type of thing. Each time it wasn't just taken over by the lunacy of, event this, event that, event this, event that. And we don't have that anymore. And I'm not getting this, don't get me wrong. I'm not getting nostalgic or, saying, I haven't reached that age yet where I'm like, these kids just don't know. I'm not doing that or anything weird like that. But I'm just saying that a lot of that stuff needs to come back around. And, everybody's looking for something. And I talk to people all the time, and they tell me how, I need to learn about this, and I need to learn how to do that. And I need, I like this from what you do, and I like that. And, how do you suggest this? And all these different things that are variables into the creation come out. And the funny thing is, it's just getting back to basics. That's the biggest problem we have in the entertainment industry, is we've gotten so strung out on, making the next big thing, that we've forgotten that sometimes the basic stuff is the best. And that's a big thing that we've lost a lot of foothold with. And when we come back to that, it's going to be a big thing, because in the 80s, they did that with these cartoons, and they did that with comic books and stuff like that. And, they had to reboot. Back in the mid 90s or early 2000s, they had to reboot a lot of stuff because they just couldn't make it work anymore. Because they lost so much viewership and so many different things going on. And it was all because of the fact that we just didn't have that ground position anymore to make it entertaining, So that late 80s last run, a lot of people call that the heyday of cartoons, because of the fact that that's when the last great cartoons were out. And I totally agree with a lot of that. I think that that's a big problem, because we need to get back to what we did back then. And I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not getting nostalgic and saying that, today's stuff sucks, because it doesn't. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but it's not the same as what we had back then. And, it's a cycle. And there were a lot of cartoons in the 60s that the 80s cartoons were based off of. It had that look and feel to it. The Hanna-Barbera superheroes that everybody knows, which I'm going to be drawing here in the near future. Everybody knows those going on, and My Tour, Space Ghost, and all that. And it just keeps getting recycled with the same type of superhero, good storyline, and strong cartoon standings coming back. And comic books need to do that too. They need to get back to basics and start, making good, solid hero versus villain stories, and moving forward with that, and stop all this big money event stuff, selling different 80 different copies of the same book under a variation, or selling each storyline busting it up into 25 pieces when it should be sold in 6 books, busting it up into 25 pieces and stringing it along for 2 years. And it's just not a good thing, and across multiple titles and all that. And so many of these things don't do that anymore. So many of these cartoons and stuff just don't do the same thing as the classics used to do, and it's starting to pay off to where kids are starting to pick up on the older stuff because that's what they're getting entertainment out of. And that's a sad thing to see because modern stuff is losing money because of the fact that they don't understand where their market is and how their market works. Sucks to be them, but it is what it is. They're going to either start picking up the line and towing it and start making good comics and making good cartoons, or they're not going to make anything fly, Humor and superheroes aren't the only thing out there, and we have to progress in that area as well, because a lot of it is we're so restricted to superheroes and so restricted to comedy that we forget we can make drama and sports and anything else out of comics, which we just don't tend to do on a professional level as we need to. There's a lot of people out there that go off and make mangas and things like that overseas, and they really tear it up with that stuff, and we haven't gotten into that arena yet, and we really need to start looking at that because there's just a ton of stuff out there. That's the reason the wrestling comics in the 80s, or actually the wrestling cartoons in the 80s, were so big. There would never been done anything like that here, so that's what we had. There's a lot of people questioning whether we should do something like that now with the way that all that stuff is taking off again with the modern wrestling arena. And you had the late 90s, early 2000s where you had Undertaker and all these other characters come out from the wrestling arena and start to pay attention to the fan base and start to kick up to that line. And it was incredible the way they paid off. But you have to make the stories practical for what they're doing. You just can't run a miniseries streak out of it and make a little bit of money and then play it out. They're still doing the same problem that we have originally discussing with the cartoons. There's so much going on that we just don't have all of that nailed down yet, and there's a big problem with that in the industry, and we have to fix it. As comics and cartoons go, we just definitely have to fix that because there's a huge gap and waste in the entertainment industry because of the fact that we just throw stuff out there trying to make money with it instead of understanding what we're doing and starting to kick out the importance of good storytelling over making a buck. You know what I mean? And there's so many people out there that just aren't doing that anymore, and we need to start thinking about that. So make good comics and make good cartoons. And that's part of why I'm doing this series, is because the nostalgia behind it, where it does come into play, is because of the fact that this all should happen right now in everyday comic books. I haven't bought a new comic book other than a graphic novel version or a collected trade of a couple of things in probably 5 years. I mean, I collect one or two things. I'll see something along the line, that I want to fill or whatever, and I'll fill a hole or whatever. But for the most part, I'm going off and getting just filler books for my collection, for my classic collection, and I'm going older instead of current. And unless it's an indie comic, because I'll read a few indie books out there, but I tend to stay away from that because I want to push for getting that back to the basics, and I want to keep my comics clean, and I want to stay away from the stuff that's out there. And I mean, I know that's a lot of a problem for most people, because it's like, hey man, you should support the industry. Well, I am supporting the industry. I'm bringing back comics that people want to read, and not comics that they should be forced to read because of the fact that somebody wants to make a quick buck. You know what I mean? That's part of the reason I've stopped working with a lot of Kickstarter stuff, is because of the fact that everybody seems to be out to make a quick buck on there, and they forget that it's not about buying 150 comic books. It's about getting your stuff out there and getting it going. Okay? That's a big problem that a lot of people aren't doing today, is the fact that they're not promoting books the way they should be. They're promoting books the way they want to on there for getting the book done, and then saying, well, I've had my book published and printed. Well, at 150 copies, it does you no good. Okay? All you're doing is trading the money, Because what's happening is what people don't understand is this. When you go off and you put on a Kickstarter, okay, and you build up 150 people to buy your book, and then you go buy one of their books in trade, you're sending back the same $3 to $5 each and every time that you buy a book. Do you realize that? It's like one big pot of money of $150, or 150 people at $5 a pop, and you're pooling that money. And yes, it works for you for the moment, and it's not the same exact $5 switched back directly at that point. But what you're missing is that when you buy someone else's book on Kickstarter for that $5, and then go back and have them buy your book later at $5, and it's the same 150 people buying everybody's books to get them out there, and it's called an exposure ring, okay? It's very common these days. They're called exposure rings, and a lot of shady publishers do this. And the thing is, whenever you go at these rings, you come in and you say, okay, I'm going to buy, 5 people's books, and you agree to pay $5 per book for 5 people, okay? Now, that same group comes in and does the same thing for you when your book comes out, which is great. Your book comes out. Awesome. You got your book sold. But is it going to make you a living if you're swapping the same $5 every other month with somebody whenever you put out a book? And then you're putting out, you got $20. Say you're doing 5 people, you got $20. All right. So you put out $25. And if you're doing $5 a pop for $25 for 5 people out of that 150, and you promise to buy 5 different books each month, what are you doing? You're circulating that same $25, and it comes back to you by those same people whenever you put out your monthly book, if you put out a monthly book. But the thing is, you're loopholing it. So it goes back, they're giving you back the same $5 that you gave them a month prior. So it's not reciprocity to put out 150 books, 150 people in a net, and then throw it out there and say, okay, I'm going to buy these books, and they're guaranteed to buy mine back. And the reason you do that is you're putting yourself into a void. And so many people miss that point. And it's strange the way they do, because of the fact that they end up losing out on so many more sales because they don't promote honestly. They promote for getting those 150 people to buy on, and then they end up getting a couple extra because those 150 people buy. That's the thing. They cross-promote each other, and that's fine to get the book out there and get it going. But you can't make a living with the same 150 people buying your book every month when you're spending $25 a month yourself buying out on somebody else's book. You can't do that. It's a vicious cycle, because then all you're doing is buying the same membership over and over and over and over. So cartoons and animation have gotten the same way, and a lot of comic book publishers are the same way as well, and they're all about getting this stuff out there, but they help each other so badly with these studios and stuff promoting, cross-promoting and joining up and helping each other out, and then they kick out a cartoon that lasts, a couple of months. They kick out a CD or a DVD, and that's it, man. I mean, you don't hear from them for another 2 years before the next season. The reason for that is because they're making all their money off their DVDs, because they're making them as DVD products. They're not making them as shows for you to be entertained by. They're making one-offs for you to make money off the DVD on the back end, because that's where all the other investors make their money, from the DVD sales. That's why movie theaters will get so many ticket sales, and that's why they have to have rights to the film before it goes to DVD or Netflix or whatever. That's why the movies have to go into these theaters for so long before you can release them to DVD. It's because they have to make their money off the box office, and then they make their money off the back end to pay for it, and then they make their secondary sales, the secondary marketing sales from their DVDs and stuff. It's marketing chain down the line, and I totally get it. But for comic creators, we should be worried about getting the monthly book out and producing a real book, not some crap to sell, a couple of issues on Kickstarter. I've actually seen people create comics, to go on Kickstarter and promote them just so they can say they had a published comic, just so they can get it out there, and then they bail on it and will stop it because they say, well, it just didn't pan out and I just wanted to do a comic book to get it out there. And you'll never see issue 2. Reason is because they used it to get leverage to try and get a job at, some other publisher or some other mainstream publisher like Marvel or Disney or, DC or, DC and Image, and they'll try to get those publishers to hire them out, which, unbeknownst to popular belief, Image doesn't hire you as an artist. You have to have a book. It's creator-owned stuff. You have to have a book. However, to the point is the fact that these guys will put out, these 150 people in these groups, and they'll use them to publish a book, and then they'll can out on them, and they won't pay back, and they won't do anything because they're trying to get their stuff going. And then they'll try to use that for getting their book published or whatever. I've seen many people do that as well, and it's always funny to see because they're not going to go anywhere because they haven't shown any longevity. They haven't shown any stability on their stuff, and then they can't figure out why they can't get hired, and then they're back, 4 months later. Well, we decided to pick up on issue 2, and everybody wonders why they do that. It's because of the fact that what's going on. I chipped my lid. They end up making that vicious cycle all over again, trying to get their book back up. And they say, well, the publishers told me I haven't made enough books, so I've got to go back and do this one. So back at Kickstarter again to sham your money out of you. And, it's an investment. I got told a long time ago that, Kickstarter wasn't for company creation or investment, that, you should use your comic book as a property to sell on there and sell direct. And I was like, what? And people actually believe that. They've gotten so inundated into that situation and so jammed up in that indoctrination where they hang on by thinking the misconception that Kickstarter is for them to get a comic book out, buy that issue as a direct sale, not to get themselves published and create a company or a product. And that's exactly the opposite of what it's actually for. So enough of the actually, but yeah, that's crazy. To think that you're on there to sell your comic book directly and not make a comic book company and seriously make a product out of it, you're training people not to support your book. I fell to that same problem with Catman Evolution #1 because of the fact that I went on there knowing that Kickstarter is a promotional campaign crowdfunding service, and knowing for a fact that it's to be used as I directed to use it. I got shot down, and I had many people tell me, I'm not going to support you funding your comic book business or your comic book product on Kickstarter. Because we're not going to pay to get your comic book out there. We're going to pay to get you, we'll buy it direct. I'm not going to pay $10 for a comic book. Well, what I had posted was to get them on board to do the comic publication. I asked for $10 at a larger level with a bunch of extra stuff. And it was mind-blowing how people got aggressive about that. And, they didn't want the rewards. They didn't want the boost. They didn't want any of that. They just wanted to rip on me for posting it. You know what I mean? And that's crazy. That's ludicrous. And we have to get a different mindset about that, because that's wrong for Kickstarter to do that, because that's not what Kickstarter is about. Kickstarter is about having all of that same leverage to get your book out there and get noticed. Okay. It's not about you getting one comic book and, somebody ripping you off because they're too cheap to invest because they think they're going to get a free comic book out of it or a discount comic book out of it, and say that you should do, you should print on demand and sell direct. That's just ridiculous. And a lot of people go off and do that. And that's part of why I stopped supporting comic books on Kickstarter, because of the fact that they boycott anybody trying to make a real business of it. And they try to browbeat and bully you into not giving them, giving them far more than what you should. And it's not reasonable nor profitable. And I mean, you're not going on there to make millions of dollars, but you can't profit from your books by giving them away either. And it doesn't make sense to keep doing that. So I quit doing that altogether. And I don't support a lot of Kickstarter stuff if I find out someone is related to or associated with those type of people that do those direct sale type of Kickstarters, because I don't want to buy 150 books. I don't want somebody to buy, I don't want somebody to buy 150 of my books and then leave me hanging for 3 months. And then come begging me for, well, you didn't buy my book back. Well, no, I want you to buy because you're a fan and a supporter. I don't want you to buy because of the fact that you think I'm going to buy your book later. That's part of the problem with reciprocity posting and reciprocity purchasing. If you're backing somebody, you should be backing because you're respecting the industry and because you enjoy the books that they're publishing, not because you're buying in to buy in good graces and good credit and buy, a guaranteed later bid for yourself. That's one, it's cheating the system. 2, it's very lazy. And 3, it's very unprofessional because you're not really supporting your book at that point. You're just selling your book to your friends. And whether you believe it or not, that's exactly what you're getting out of it, because that's exactly who it is. It's 150 people that are your friends that you're selling your book to because of the fact that they will buy it because you're going to buy their book later. And again, it's that fake reciprocity thing, and it's totally farced, and you should not do it because of the fact that it's just it's a dead end. So, that's the reason I'm saying that. It is an absolute dead end. You should not do it. Because what's going to end up happening is eventually the money's going to run out because you guys are going to have to get real jobs and go out and do something else because you're not making any money off your comic books and your comics don't sell. Okay, it's a dead-end loop. And all you're doing is spending your life building up the same 10 comic books that you shouldn't have in the first place because of the fact that you didn't produce them properly. And that's your call. I'm calling you out on it. Sorry, that's the way I believe about it. And if you disagree, that's fine. But I don't agree with people buying comic books to swap. I don't believe that helps the industry at all. I don't believe that helps anybody do anything properly as far as building a business. If you're an artist, you should discover what your brand is, what your art is, what your style is, what your book is, and get it out there. But, that's my take on it too. So that's just my 2 cents from it. It's neither here nor there. It is what it is. But I got asked about it earlier, and in relationship to this cartoon thing, it's the same thing. There's so many people out there that just kick out stuff, and they think that they should be rich and filthy rich, and you should be just kissing their butt because you're part of that 150 people that's supposed to be buying their book from them. And then they wonder why at shows and stuff, or at real publishing centers like editors and things like that come out to see them, they can't figure out why these guys won't hire them. Well, I'm great. I got 150 sales. I got 150 backers. I'm huge. Well, yeah, right. Whatever. So, that's the way it is, and it sucks. But and that's a technical term, by the way. But but it is what it is. So, if you really want to help the industry and you really want to change the way comics are done and you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself and affect the industry to where it makes money to where you can make a living at it, then understand what you're doing when you do these things, because that's just bad business. Okay? So that's where I'm at with this. And this bad boy is just about done. Now, I know this one's a little more cartoony than I've been doing lately, but I wanted to keep the nostalgia look to the classic homage for the cartoon. Putting in the bubbles here from where he's swimming around and cutting the water. So but yeah, don't get caught up in that Kickstarter crap. Kickstarter is a great program, but don't get caught up in those rings, is what I'm saying. Don't get caught up in those arenas of, these people that aren't doing the job anymore and creating the comics. They're just swapping back and forth. Don't do trade for trade. It's a trap. Don't do it. You'll get stuck, and it's not going to work for you because you'll never sell any more comics than that 150 unless you finally decide to change your tactics. So don't do that. But anyway, putting in some more bubbles here. Oh my goodness, my nose. My allergies are driving me crazy today. Sorry for my sniffles. Yeah, it's one of those things where with the TigerSharks underwater, make sure that you do this modern foam thing, to leave the trail for swimming and breaking water, because that's when people shove around in heavy water, they tend to force air pockets because they're breaking the water around them, because their space and volume of the body that they're in breaks the water. So that's where you get that, because a lot of people go, well, how do you make that break? Well, think about this. If that's a mass in the water, that's a pocket of air. When you move out of that pocket of air, that water has to be reabsorbed, so therefore it breaks the divide. So that's where you get that from. Just a little bit of a graphic tip. And I'm going to call this one good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment, Noel. That's awesome, man. Thanks for showing up. That's going to be it for today. That's my Tiger Shark. That's the first one in this run. You guys can go online and check these guys out. They're awesome. The series, like I said, sadly only lasted one season. It was with a couple of other cartoons on an hour series called The Comic Strip, and it had Karate Cat and Street Frogs and a couple of others. It was strange, but it worked. But it was it was 80s kids, just a modern 80s kids thing. We had a lot of that stuff going on, very contemporary. But tomorrow, out of these will be Walro, which is the leader of the Tiger Sharks. He will be the next one up tomorrow. So I'll be knocking that out. I'm feeling much better. Thank you for all the well wishes because of the 24-hour bug I had yesterday and whatnot. I'm a little tired and sickly today, but I'm alive and I'm doing well. And luckily, it stuck in my head and my muscles and gave me the cramps and the pain, and all that, and the fever. But it didn't give me the stomach issues or any of that to tie me down for a week. Thank God. But yeah, I am full 100% back working on this stuff. Going to be working all weekend to knock this stuff out. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for hanging on and checking in on me. I appreciate that. And like I said, get out there and make some comics and avoid this stuff. Avoid these problem areas like the Kickstarter issue, those clicks. Reciprocity is one thing, but trading up for literal trades is just a dead loop. It's pointless to do that. But let's get back tomorrow, and I'll catch you then. Have a great weekend.